Amid the vast lands of medieval Russia in the 14th century, a man was born whose life would be marked by profound spirituality and an unrelenting pursuit of God's presence. His name was Bartholomew, but he would later be known as Saint Sergius of Radonej, one of the greatest saints of Russian Orthodoxy and a model of monastic life. From childhood, Bartholomew showed a burning desire for the knowledge of God. The son of noble Christians, Kirill and Maria, he grew up in an environment of deep faith. However, he faced learning difficulties and often felt unable to keep up with his studies, which caused him great sadness. One day, while walking in the countryside, he met an elderly monk who blessed him and prayed for him. After that prayer, Bartholomew experienced a miraculous change. He began to learn easily and to understand the scriptures deeply. This event marked his life and increased his desire to dedicate himself entirely to God. Over the years, his spiritual thirst intensified. After the death of his parents, he withdrew to the solitude of the forests in the Radonej region, where, together with his brother Stephen, he built a small chapel and a hut. There, he began a life of prayer, penance, and contemplation, away from the world. However, isolation would not last forever. His holiness began to attract disciples who wished to follow his example of monastic life. Reluctant at first, Sergius finally accepted the arrival of the new monks and organized a community that would become the famous Holy Trinity Monastery. The monastery, founded under his guidance, was not only a place of prayer, but also a center of spiritual and cultural formation. There, the monks lived according to the rule of work and prayer, devoting themselves to copying manuscripts, farming, and charity to those in need. The fame of his holiness spread throughout Russia, attracting not only monks, but also princes and rulers seeking his wisdom and blessings. Sergius became a counselor to Prince Dmitry Donskoy, guiding him in political and spiritual matters. In the context of Tatar invasions, Russia was going through difficult times. The people were divided, and a foreign threat loomed over the nation. Sergius, with his spiritual vision, exhorted the rulers to unite in defense of the homeland, trusting in divine protection. His influence was decisive for victory in the Battle of Kulikovo in 1380. Before the battle, Dmitry Donskoy visited the saint in search of guidance. Sergius blessed him and assured him that God would grant victory to the Russian people if they fought with faith and justice. The battle was arduous, but Russia emerged victorious, strengthening its national identity and paving the way for final liberation from the Tatar yoke. Saint Sergius's spiritual contribution was recognized as an essential factor in this victory. Despite his political influence, he always remained humble and distant from worldly interests. His only desire was the glory of God and the sanctification of his brothers. He continued to live simply, refusing titles or privileges. His life was a testimony of incessant prayer. It was said that he often spent entire nights in vigils, interceding for the people and for the monks under his care. His relationship with God was one of deep intimacy and surrender. The miracles attributed to Saint Sergius were numerous. It is said that he multiplied food to feed the poor, and that his prayer had the power to heal the sick and free people tormented by evil spirits. On one occasion, when the monastic community faced a severe shortage of food, he trusted entirely in divine providence. Shortly afterward, unexpectedly, travelers arrived at the monastery bearing a large quantity of provisions. His humility was so remarkable that, despite being the founder of the monastery, he refused to be called abbot. He preferred to be seen only as a simple monk, always willing to serve his brothers with love and dedication. He also had a profound devotion to the Holy Trinity, which was reflected not only in the monastery's name, but also in his preaching and teachings. For him, communion with God was the foundation of Christian life. His influence extended beyond the monastery walls. Many princes and rulers sought him for spiritual and political guidance, trusting in his wisdom and discernment, enlightened by God. His example of monastic life inspired the growth of monasticism in Russia. Many other monasteries were founded following his principles, becoming centers of Christian spirituality and culture. Saint Sergius also promoted reconciliation among Christians. In times of internal disputes, he worked tirelessly for peace, seeking to unite hearts in faith and in love for Christ. In his simplicity, he avoided honors and preferred the solitude of prayer. However, God exalted him, making him a true beacon of holiness for Russia and for the entire Church. As he aged, his holiness became even more evident. His face reflected a supernatural peace, and his presence inspired all who encountered him to seek a holier life. Even in the face of challenges and persecutions, he never lost his trust in God. His unshakable faith was a living testimony to the power of divine grace, sustaining him in every adversity. The monastic community he founded continued to grow, attracting more and more vocations. The monastery became one of the main spiritual centers of Russia, radiating the light of the gospel to all regions. In his final years, he dedicated himself even more intensely to prayer and silence. He knew that his earthly mission was drawing to a close, but his soul remained completely surrendered to God's will. Finally, on September 25, 1392, Saint Sergius fell asleep in the Lord, leaving a legacy of holiness and love for God. His death was not the end, but the beginning of a veneration that would extend over the centuries, making him one of the most beloved saints of the Eastern Christian tradition. After his death, the monks of the Holy Trinity Monastery deeply felt his absence, but soon realized that his spiritual presence remained alive among them. Many testified to miracles at his tomb, and devotion to the saint began to grow rapidly. His tomb became a place of pilgrimage. People from all parts of Russia came in search of blessings and healings, bringing their pleas and witnessing the powerful intercession of Saint Sergius before God. In 1422, only 30 years after his death, the Russian Orthodox Church officially canonized him, recognizing his holiness and the many miracles attributed to his intercession. His cult spread throughout Russia and beyond. That same year, his body was exhumed and found incorrupt, an evident sign of the holiness of his life. The sacred relic was transferred to a new church at the Holy Trinity Monastery, where it remains to this day as a spiritual treasure of Christendom. In his honor, the monks built a magnificent cathedral dedicated to the Holy Trinity. The site became one of the most important spiritual centers of Russia, attracting thousands of pilgrims annually. Saint Sergius's influence on Russian spirituality is immeasurable. His example of humility, prayer, and love for neighbor inspired generations of monks, priests, and lay people to follow the path of holiness. In the following centuries, the Holy Trinity Monastery grew in importance, becoming a symbol of Russian national unity and a spiritual refuge in times of crisis. During periods of war and persecution, the faithful turned to Saint Sergius for protection and guidance. His intercession was regarded as a powerful shield against the enemies of the faith and the homeland. Even centuries after his death, Saint Sergius's legacy remained alive. Many spiritual and monastic leaders drew inspiration from his life to renew spirituality and monastic discipline in Russia. During the Soviet period, when the Church faced brutal persecution, Saint Sergius's memory remained a source of hope for Christians. His monastery was closed, but faith in his intercession never faded. With the fall of the communist regime, the Holy Trinity Monastery was reopened and restored, resuming its central role in Russia's spiritual life. Once again, thousands of pilgrims returned to the sacred site in search of solace and the renewal of faith. To this day, the monastery is one of the main pilgrimage centers of the Russian Orthodox Church, a living testimony to the impact of Saint Sergius on the history and spirituality of the Russian people. The iconography of Saint Sergius is widespread, depicting him as a monk with a serene expression, holding a scroll and blessing with the other hand, symbolizing his mission as a spiritual master. His liturgical feast is celebrated with great solemnity on September 25th, bringing together the faithful from everywhere to honor his legacy and seek his intercession. Beyond Russia, Saint Sergius is venerated in various parts of the world, especially among Orthodox communities that recognize in him a perfect example of Christian life. The life of Saint Sergius also inspired Russian art and literature. Great writers and poets such as Dostoevsky and Tolstoy mentioned his influence on the country's spiritual culture. His model of monastic life helped shape the spirituality of the Russian Orthodox Church, emphasizing the importance of prayer, asceticism, and charity as a path to union with God. In addition to his impact on monastic life, Saint Sergius is also recognized as a peacemaker. His actions were crucial in uniting the Russian princes during times of political fragmentation. Medieval Russia was divided into small principalities, often at war with each other. Saint Sergius preached unity, exhorting rulers to place faith and the common good above personal ambitions. His message of reconciliation resonated deeply, and many leaders, inspired by his wisdom, sought to resolve their conflicts peacefully, thus strengthening the nation. Saint Sergius is also known for his mystical visions. In one of them, he saw the Holy Trinity in the form of 3 angels seated at a table, a vision that inspired the famous icon by Andrei Rublev, one of the most venerated icons of Eastern Christianity. His love for the poor and needy was a reflection of the gospel. He not only preached about charity, but lived it intensely, sharing everything he had with those in greatest need. Even as a spiritual leader of great influence, he never strayed from simplicity. His monastic cell was humble, and his diet always frugal, demonstrating detachment from material goods. His spirituality was rooted in unceasing prayer. It was said that he prayed continuously, even during daily tasks, always keeping his heart turned toward God. For Saint Sergius, prayer was not merely a duty, but the essence of the Christian life. He taught that through prayer, the soul unites with God and finds its true peace. His teaching on prayer influenced generations of monks who strove to follow in his footsteps in their quest for communion with the Creator. His influence was so significant that even the Patriarchate of Moscow, when established in the 16th century, recognized Saint Sergius as one of its principal intercessors and patrons. For centuries, the leaders of the Church and the Russian state sought his intercession before making major decisions, trusting in his heavenly wisdom. His life is a testimony to the power of holiness to transform not only individuals, but entire societies. His example shaped the spiritual destiny of Russia. Today, Saint Sergius remains a model of faith, humility, and service to God. His life teaches us that, even in difficult times, prayer and trust in the Lord are the path to true peace. In a world marked by divisions and uncertainties, his message of unity and love of neighbor remains timely, inviting us to seek holiness in our daily lives. Saint Sergius's legacy is immortal. His holiness shone like a light in the heart of Russia, and his influence continues to guide generations of Christians on their journey to God. His example of life calls us to seek a deeper faith, more fervent prayer, and a more sincere love for our neighbor, living according to Christ's teachings. Thus, his memory remains alive, not only in churches and monasteries, but in the hearts of all those who sincerely and humbly seek God. Saint Sergius of Radonej is undoubtedly one of the greatest saints of Christendom, a spiritual beacon that continues to illuminate the path of those who wish to follow Christ with faithfulness and love. The impact of Saint Sergius of Radonej goes beyond his earthly life. He became a spiritual and moral reference point for Russia, with his life of prayer, humility, and devotion serving as the cornerstone of a long monastic tradition. His influence extended over the centuries, guiding the hearts of the faithful even in times of great turbulence. The faith he cultivated and passed on at his monastery generated a wave of spiritual renewal that crossed generations. His teachings on the true Christian life, centered on the love of God and charity toward one's neighbor, formed the foundation for many of the spiritual values of the Russian Church. The notion of a monk who lives in solitude, but at the same time dedicates his life to prayer and God's work on behalf of others, became a model for Orthodox Christians, who saw in him the perfect example of monasticism. It was not about fleeing the world's difficulties, but about surrendering completely to God's service and the building up of the Church. Over the centuries, Saint Sergius's presence was remembered at decisive moments for Russia. In times of war, his example of faith and courage provided the strength needed to withstand invasion and external oppression. His intercession was invoked, and his figure became a symbol of unity and resistance. In the history of the Russian Church, Saint Sergius was a beacon of fidelity to orthodoxy. His pastoral work and his commitment to the spiritual formation of monks resulted in the creation of a network of monasteries that spread monastic principles throughout Russian territory, promoting a true spiritual revolution. Even after his death, veneration of Saint Sergius continued to grow, and the great reformers and spiritual leaders of the Russian Orthodox Church saw in him a model of holiness that transcended the boundaries of his time. Saint Sergius's church was a place of healing not only for the body, but also for the soul. His image was associated with various miracles that took place in his monastery and in other locations around Russia. People turned to him not only seeking physical cures, but also seeking spiritual counsel to overcome personal and collective challenges. Over time, Saint Sergius's words about the importance of trusting God in every difficulty became a cornerstone for Russian Christians, especially in times of war and suffering. He reminded them that even in adversity, God's presence never fails. Saint Sergius was revered as a patron of the Russian people. Over the centuries, especially in times of need, it was common for the population to gather in prayer before his reliquary, asking for his intercession and protection. His image became a source of comfort and hope. He was also recognized as an intercessor before God in moments of crisis. His ability to see the future with discernment and act in accordance with God's will led many to seek him not just for healing, but also for guidance and peace in uncertain times. In his life, he did not concern himself with status or honors. His only goal was to live according to God's will and lead others to do the same. Simplicity and detachment were the hallmarks of his existence. This was reflected in the way he related to his disciples and other monks. Saint Sergius was a peacemaking figure in a country that frequently faced internal divisions. He always sought reconciliation, using wisdom gained through prayer and spiritual discernment to bring peace and harmony, especially among Russian princes. Throughout his life, he was a tireless advocate of unity and solidarity among the Russian people, taking care to avoid divisions within the church and to seek the common good above any personal interest. His great love for Russia was rooted in his deep faith and devotion to God. The monastery founded by Saint Sergius, the Holy Trinity Monastery, became a center of great importance for Russia's religious and political life. It was a place where Christian faith and culture were preserved and disseminated, and where monasticism thrived. Over time, Saint Sergius's monastery became a pillar of the Russian Orthodox Church, representing spiritual stability and a point of unity for those who followed the monastic path. His life was proof that when the heart is completely turned to God, the world around it is profoundly transformed. Even in the darkest moments of Russian history, the Holy Trinity Monastery and the memory of Saint Sergius remained symbols of unbreakable faith. Russian history, marked by both achievements and tragedies, bore witness to the constant presence of his interceding spirit. Saint Sergius's trust in divine providence is one of the virtues most admired by his followers. He firmly believed that God cares for every aspect of human life, and that even moments of suffering have a divine purpose. Saint Sergius made it clear through his life that true riches do not lie in material possessions, but in a life full of prayer, penance, and dedication to one's neighbor. He taught that the Christian heart must be free of selfishness and of all that separates it from the love of God. His humility was the great testimony of his sanctity. He did not seek recognition, he simply strove to live faithfully to his calling. This self-denial and his total surrender to the divine will continue to inspire Christians today. Saint Sergius also emphasized the importance of inner peace. For him, true peace is found only in God. He taught that by living according to God's will, the soul finds serenity and fulfillment, regardless of external circumstances. His legacy is also visible in the development of monasticism in Russia. He helped create a solid foundation for monastic life, promoting discipline, study, and manual labor as means of sanctification. His vision of a balanced monasticism centered on prayer and service is still followed today. Saint Sergius was also known for his love of the arts and culture. Under his leadership, the Holy Trinity Monastery became a center of cultural activities where the copying of manuscripts, the painting of icons, and the preservation of religious traditions flourished. His wisdom was reflected in his ability to help others discern God's will in their lives. Many came to him for spiritual counsel, and he guided them firmly but with deep compassion. He was a model of balance between action and contemplation. His life was dedicated to both prayer and practical work, showing that the pursuit of holiness does not require complete isolation from the world, but rather a way of living in the world without belonging to it. His story also teaches us about the value of patience. Saint Sergius knew that holiness is often not attained immediately, but is the fruit of a constant life of prayer, discipline, and surrender to God. The communion with God he sought was something that permeated every aspect of his life, from work to moments of rest. He demonstrated that holiness is not confined to special moments, but must be lived in everyday life. Even when pain and suffering befell him, Saint Sergius did not turn away from prayer. He saw every moment of life as an opportunity to draw closer to God, offering each suffering as a sacrifice out of love for him. What makes Saint Sergius's life so admirable is his ability to transform all situations, from the simplest to the most complex, into moments of sanctification. He was an example of how every act, however ordinary, can become a prayer when done with love for God. His life and legacy continue to be a powerful testimony for Christians today. Saint Sergius of Radonej reminds us that true holiness is achieved not by extraordinary deeds, but through faithfulness in the small things of life. Finally, his memory is not merely an echo of the past, but a living presence in the heart of the Orthodox Church. His life, his prayer, his example of humility and service continue to inspire generations of Christians around the world. Devotion to Saint Sergius remains strong, not only in Russia, but in many parts of the world. His example of life teaches us that, in the midst of difficulties, God is always with us, and His grace is sufficient to guide us on the path of holiness. His story is that of a man who, following in Christ's footsteps, turned his life into an unceasing prayer, uniting himself to the Lord in all he did. Saint Sergius of Radonej is undoubtedly one of the most revered figures of the Orthodox Church, and his legacy of faith, humility, and love for God continues to resonate through the centuries. He is a constant reminder that holiness is within everyone's reach, not by our own strength, but by the grace of God, who calls us to live for Him in all that we are and do. His life remains a great source of inspiration for those who seek God with a pure heart, an example of how to live out true faith in a world full of challenges. Saint Sergius of Radonej is an eternal testimony that, through prayer, humility, and service, it is possible to find the peace that the world cannot offer, and it is possible to lead others to that same peace. His mission, both in life and after his death, was to help others find and live in union with God, and his example remains a beacon for all Christians who seek that same union. Reflecting on his life, we are challenged to follow his example of holiness, setting aside our ego and seeking God's will at every moment of our lives. Like Saint Sergius, we are called to be instruments of peace and unity, to live out our calling with complete trust in God, knowing that He is our strength and our refuge. Saint Sergius of Radonezh is a saint for all times, a model of Christian life that never loses its relevance. May his intercession continue to guide us on the path of holiness and true peace in Christ.